Just orientation of what's happening. We had youth, we had women, and now this discussion is on different topics: migrants, labor, but especially human trafficking. And while we have the privilege of having Christine Nathan over here, who's president of ICMC, and I'm proud of her because she's from Asia, and she's from India, and she's from my parish in the cathedral. And so we're happy to have her in person. The other two will be a video, Sister Abby, and then Cardinal Nichols heads a group called Santa Marta Group. This really combats trafficking. It's called Santa Marta because it was an initiative of the Holy Father, Pope Francis. And he, when Cardinal Nichols discussed it with him, he was very encouraging. Cardinal Bo is a member of that group also, I think. And the group began at Santa Marta, so it's called Santa Marta. So we'll hear a video, 7-minute video from, and then we'll see. We'll take a discussion, and we also, during the course of the evening, we'll hear our Vatican Monsignor Baggio is somewhere here. I think he's come. If he comes, we'll hear him also. And over to the moderator for the rest of the proceedings.
So as Cardinal Oswald said, we have this afternoon the topic, the impact of migration, labor, and human trafficking on Asian society. And the first speaker is Miss Catherine Nathan of India. Sorry, Miss Christine Nathan of India. She is the president of International Catholic Migrant Commission. Ms. Nathan will speak for 20 minutes. Now to you, Ms. Nathan.
I suggest you speak from top here. It's easier, more visible to everybody from top on this podium.
Hello. Yeah. Good afternoon. Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, delegates, sisters and brothers. Thank you for the introduction. Allow me to introduce myself in my new position. My name is Christine Nathan, the newly elected president of ICMC, that is the International Catholic Migration Commission. I bring you warm greetings on behalf of ICMC. At the outset, let me thank FABC for organizing this conference and inviting ICMC to address the conference. It is indeed a pleasure and honor to be part of this 50-year FABC General Conference, journeying together as people of Asia. I'm really happy to be back in Bangkok. It was my home for 12 years. When I was working with the UN, that is the International Labour Organization, at the regional office as the regional specialist for workers' education, covering 32 countries in the Asia and Pacific region. ILO, for those who do not know much about the organization, is a tripartite organization where the three partners work together as equal partners, that is the government, employers, and trade unions. The only UN agency which works with all three stakeholders, unlike all other UN agencies who work only with the government. I had the opportunity to work closely on all the three issues: migration, labor, and human trafficking, both at the ILO and now with the ICMC at local, national, regional, and international levels. I also worked in groupings of South Asia, that is SAARC, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Afghanistan, and Maldives. And ASEAN countries, Thailand, Myanmar, Philippines, Malaysia, Laos, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam, as well as countries in the Pacific Islands, because most of the countries in South Asia and ASEAN are both sending countries and receiving countries. I also had the opportunity to look at migrant issues with the international finance institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and the ADB. Also, since 2 years, during the COVID period, as a member of the Labor and Migration Commission of the Archdiocese of Mumbai, India, and I'm glad to see my Cardinal Oswald Gracious and Bishop Alvin present here as part of the planning and organizing team of the conference. With this background, it is my pleasure to speak with you all on this occasion. The topic before us today is migration, labor, and human trafficking, particularly the plight in Asia. As we all know, the Church, and especially the Holy Father, has taken a strong position in terms of migration, labor, and human trafficking and refugees. On the issue of labor, Pope Francis worked closely with the ILO, as both the organizations strongly believe on issues of social justice. The Holy Father in 2018, I'm happy to share this, organized a global consultative meeting in Rome for trade unionists all over the world on their role and responsibilities and challenges in organizing the workers into trade unions and the challenges they face. Subsequently, he realized he should also organize a consultative meeting with employers on their roles and responsibilities and how they could be model employers in the world of business today. This is a Christian-based organization of employers. This organization is called UniaPAC, advises Vatican on the developments in the world of business. Why I am mentioning this is that the Holy Father at the international level has seen the importance of these partners if we are to address issues of labor, migration, and trafficking. And how do we eliminate the issues of human trafficking? A lot has been said for the migrant workers and the role of governments, but very often we ignore the role of the employer, but a start has been made by Pope Francis. In this regard, the mission of the ICMC, a specialized commission, primarily to protect and serve uprooted people, including refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people, victims of human trafficking, and migrants, regardless of their faith, their race, their ethnicity, or nationality. This is our vision and our work towards helping these people. ICMC is about restoring dignity, inspiring change amongst the migrant community. It was founded in 1951, was mandated by Pope Pius XII to unite and organize existing Catholic associations and committees and to promote, reinforce, and coordinate projects and activities on behalf of migrants and refugees. Ever since the founding, ICMC faithfully has strived to protect and serve uprooted people, including refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people, victims of human trafficking, and migrants. The Pope takes keen interest in the work of migrants and refugees. ICMC carries out its activities in accordance with humanitarian principles and the highest professional standards and is guided by Catholic values and teaching. It is firmly committed to uphold the rights and dignity of people forced to leave their homes because of conflict, persecution, or violence, the impact of disaster or climate change, the loss of livelihoods, and an escape from abject poverty. Currently, the ICMC is on the ground in Ukraine, assisting citizens in providing food, shelter, medicine, and seeking paths for their safe passage to safer areas. Having given you a little bit background of the ICMC, let me now raise some salient issues and concerns of migrant workers. The World Bank estimates that by 2050, there will be more than 400 million migrants. We can no longer think of our economies, of our societies, of our culture without thinking of human mobility. Migration is inevitable. Migration is a huge issue in the Asia and Pacific region. In many ways, it touches millions of people, particularly those who are living in the rural areas and villages. According to Asian Development Bank, there are over 50 million international migrants, mostly in the Asia and Pacific region. Those who work in this region and in the Gulf countries. For example, Malaysia has about 3.2 million 3.2 million workers, including some 1.2 million undocumented. India has over 18 million working and living overseas, of which 8.1 million in the Gulf countries alone. The statistics from the ILO estimates over 10 million Bangladeshi workers are overseas, mostly employed as low-skilled laborers in the Gulf countries. Now, research has also revealed a great number of women decide to migrate as heads of family in search of better jobs and opportunities. The feminization of migration has brought new challenges to the migration governance, and we need to understand these vulnerabilities and look at the well-being of the migrant women and girls throughout the migrant phases, before they migrate, during, and upon return home. Another study reveals, for example, out of the 6 million Philippine workers, 54% are women. Women workers in these countries are subject to greater discrimination, greater harassment, both physical and verbal abuse. Migrant workers, in particular women, earn significantly less on average than nationals in destination countries. This is because migrants often fill jobs unattractive to nationals, and women are among the least protected and the lowest paid. Asia is a scene of a booming migration industry, which operates both legally and illegally, providing contract labor, cheap labor to some of the wealthiest and most dynamic economies at a high human cost. While migration provides productive labor and an economic lifeline for millions, the dramatic plight of unprotected female migrant workers are an increasing source of public concern. As evidences of abuses mounts, as we all know, protection from the sending countries is also very limited. In many countries, the countries hurriedly skill their workers for overseas employment, and there are many challenges in the families. Family life is disrupted, multiple sex partners when one spouse is away, children drop out from school, young children take to drugs and alcohol. The social fabric is slowly getting destroyed. The campaign for job creation and decent work by trade unions, CSOs, and NGOs falls on deaf ears, as it is easier for the government to send them off to another country. Many countries in our region do not have employment policies, and hence there's tremendous lack of jobs and high level of unemployment in several countries in this region. Migration is considered as the backbone of several countries in the region. Let me give you an example. Philippines, Bangladesh, Nepal are countries known as remittance economies, where the foreign reserves of the country are high, GDP growth is high because of remittances of the migrant workers. We know the exploitation and their working conditions and the manner in which they are treated. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend a national conference on migrant workers in Delhi, where the Ministry of External Affairs mentioned India has received $87 billion last year as remittances. India wants to be known as the skill capital of the world, only to hurriedly send our workers out of the country. Migration is also a big business. For migrants sending countries, it's a huge source of remittance. For Bangladesh, these workers pump in some $15 billion into the Bangladesh economy. The remittances of business organizations comprise of a very small percentage, as business keeps their money in overseas tax havens such as Swiss banks, Cayman Islands, Bermuda, etc. The country invests with them with huge bank loans to start business, but no money is invested in migrant workers who sell their land, their wife's jewelry, money from loan sharks, etc., but their remittances form the major part of the GDP. The other big issue is trafficking, especially of women and girls. It is estimated around 600,000 to 800,000 cases of trafficking happen every year in Asia and the Pacific region. This is a huge problem we now face in the region after migration. The push factors, poverty, lack of employment opportunities, cost of education, and related issues push people to migrate to other places or seek jobs overseas. Low-skilled workers, women find it easier to go look for domestic jobs or low-paid jobs. The ILO adopted a convention on domestic workers in 2010. Almost all countries in the world agreed to the adoption of the convention. First time the convention for workers in the informal economy was adopted. I was there while the convention was adopted. The employer group walked out of the meeting several times during the 3-week discussion, opposing their convention, as they were against there should be any law for domestic workers, no national wage, and no issues for rights. The pull factors opportunities for work in Gulf states, regular income, working with many other people from the same country, encourages people to seek work overseas. Labor migration in Asia and Pacific largely occur under temporary migration programs, and most migrants engage in manual labor and low-skilled work. Migrant workers in this region often fill jobs unattractive to nationals, and some occupations are highly segregated by gender. Slave labor is what we see in most of the countries. They are classified. There are many cases of workers working and living under slavery conditions. There is no fixed contract, passports taken away by the employers, uncertainty of wages, and payment time are all classified as people working in slave conditions. It is common that many workers face such conditions. Countries that have ratified Convention on Forced Labor, but the implementation is weak, poor, and non-existent. Let me take you to the issue of deaths. Deaths are a regular feature, particularly in South Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Workers dying on jobs due to accidents, safety issues, occupational health complications, almost little or no compensation. There are many cases where families face severe problems and difficulties in getting the dead person's body back home because of poor economic conditions. On the other hand, due to poverty, many more are ready to take up the jobs despite these dangers. Such is the plight of migrant workers. I must mention here, countries in the region receive the dead bodies of their families and relatives, sometimes after 3 to 6 months after the body parts have been removed, could be for organ sale. The family receives just the shell of the body, pathetic while they're exploited while working and humiliated after death. How can migration be improved? For migrant workers, there is a whole range of issues that concern them. This includes the recruitment of workers, the fees they have to pay to the middleman, the issue of contract, knowledge or lack of knowledge about the country where they are going, about their labor laws. The lack of clarity about their working conditions, wages, working hours, accommodation, safety and health conditions. Many have no knowledge, and only on their arrival at their country, they come to know of some conditions. We all know that the contracts which they sign is not in the language they can read. Also, their passports are taken away, and they are heavily borrowed money to fund their passage to the new country. The workers are caught in a situation where they are forced to work as there being no other choice. The other area we have to look at is lack of governance at the country sending migrants and also the country receiving migrant workers. There is a lack of proper laws and lack of implementation. These are regards recruitment, governance of recruiting agents, charging fees by recruiting agencies. Workers should not be charged any fees, and it should be the responsibility of the employers for the transportation of the workers and any other cost related to it. Opportunities should be made for workers so that they do not have to borrow heavily from loan sharks or sell their land, property to fund their passage or pay fees for their jobs. Similarly, there is a lack of laws to protect migrant workers in migrant-receiving countries. Except for Japan and Korea, no other country allows workers to organize themselves into unions and be able to carry out collective bargaining. Most of the countries in the Gulf, as also in Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Brunei, have not ratified the core conventions of the international organization, that is, freedom of association and collective bargaining. These conventions by the ILO and the UN provide for the right of workers to join unions and to carry out collective bargaining. Workers need to have these rights protect themselves, their work conditions, wages, and their safety and health. There is a lack of proper and adequate labor laws to provide protection to migrant workers. Either there is an absence of laws or the migrants are not covered by the national laws that govern their citizens. ILO Convention states that migrant workers should have the same rights as local workers, and they should be protected by the same laws as for local workers. Promising developments have been achieved in trade union cooperation between the origin and destination countries. These are some positive case studies. The Nepal and Sri Lankan trade unions have signed bilateral agreements for the protection of migrant workers with their counterparts in Bahrain and Kuwait. Agreements were also signed by the trade unions, the Korean Federation of Trade Union, and the Malaysian trade unions. And this shows that such arrangements can assist low-skilled migrant workers with filing labor complaints, and accessing redress procedures. They can also prevent recruitment malpractices by alerting workers in their legal rights, including the legislation of maximum fees. In some countries, a worker representative can be present in the labor attaché office to assist the workers and receive their complaints and help with their grievances. Last year, an MOU was signed with the government of Japan and India that the Indian workers in Japan gets the same wages and working conditions as the Japanese nationals get. No such thinking or planning for the low-skilled migrant worker. What can we do from the church? We can work together with like-minded NGOs, trade unions, work towards pushing governments to adopt proper laws, governments to ratify UN and ILO conventions on migration. They should get the right to unionize and right to collective bargaining. Also, migrant-receiving countries, in particular, to ratify Occupation Safety and Health and the Domestic Workers Convention. We should work together to implement the UN based SDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals, which recognizes the importance of decent work, both locally and internationally. SDG 8, for example, aims to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, as well as full and decent work for all. We have to protect the labor rights and the safe and secure working environment for all workers, including migrant workers, in particular women migrants and those in precarious employment. Meanwhile, SDG 10 aims to reduce inequalities within and among countries to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. What can we do? We should have a campaign to make migration a choice, not a necessity, by creating decent work opportunities in our countries. We have to respect human rights, including labor rights of all migrants. We have to ensure fair recruitment and equal treatment of migrant workers to prevent exploitation and level playing field with the nationals. We should try to formulate fair migration schemes. We should promote bilateral agreements and multilateral agreements regulated for migration. We have to counter unacceptable situations through the promotion of the fundamental principles and rights at work. We should try to promote dialogue involving ministers of labor, employers' organization in policy making of migration. We should formulate and strengthen the rights-based approach on migration. Our work should focus to work together to ensure that governments provide for effective labor laws. Moreover, there should be an effective mechanism that should arrest exploitation. Then there should be judicial mechanisms to seek to redress. We can all work together to apply pressure on our governments, on our employers in this regard. I would like to thank the FABC again for giving me the opportunity to address this conference of journeying together as people of Asia. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Dear bishops, now it is time for us to pose questions to Ms. Nathan. Nathan, please remain there. And I think we know that she has presented very well this very challenging area of our pastoral service, migration, labor, human trafficking. Migrants and refugees are vulnerable to human trafficking. She has explained very well. And the volume of the challenge, for example, 400 million migrants all over the world, and she was saying that in Asian countries, we have proportional migrants coming, and also we are facing this problem. And the fact that international funds are not reaching them for their protection. So support of the migrant workers is a concern that everybody has to take into account. And the slave labor conditions, etc., contractors not respecting the rights of the workers, and why don't the migrant workers do not have equal rights of the national workers, etc. And she mentioned this, only Japan and Korea has given the right of forming trade unions for the migrant workers. And this kind of problems, and there is a large area in which the church can enter and help the migrant workers to get their rights recognized in the countries where they are, and also to play the role of the Good Samaritan of the church. So she has presented it right. Now it is time for us to ask questions or clarifications to her, as she is a very knowledgeable person in the field, and she is the president of this ICMC, International Catholic Migrant Commission. So we can get the real answers. So yes, Bishop Harold. No?
Yes, Madam Nathan, thank you very much. It was a wonderful exposure. Um, I have been also a bit interested in this Migrants Commission. I have worked a little in Sri Lanka, and I myself did a little bit of study in Rome while I was at the Academia Alfonsiana. My question to you today, with all the revelations you did today to us, what about the child labor? Is it coming under your sort of in this purview, or do you still have a major study on child labor?
Yeah,
Shall I take a few
yeah,
more?
you can answer, or
You want to take a few more?
asking all the questions, then you answer. Or?
Okay. Thank you. Hello. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I'm also on the platform of the ILO UNICEF issues on child labor, and it's shocking to see that our region, particularly India, has the highest number of child labor, highest number of girl children also trafficked. Now, when the migrants, if you look at national migration, like what happened in India during the pandemic, it's the whole family who migrates. So it's the mother, father, and the children. And then the children are also, while the parents are working, the child is also working. The child is not a recognized worker. Hello? Yeah. The child is not a recognized worker, but since the wages of the parents is so low, we need an extra hand where the child brings in, say, 40 or 50 rupees every day. And that is the reason child labor is heavily growing in these countries. Now, if you look at the country like India, we have child labor in most of the unorganized sector, whether it's construction, whether it's agriculture, whether it's mines. They are found also in very hazardous areas of work. Children are not supposed to be employed in hazardous areas. We have the convention 182 and 138. But still, because of poverty, the parents do not think of conventions and such things, and neither does the government look at these issues. This brings me to an interesting point, because we are supposed to have labor inspection in our country. So labor inspection's job is to go to the different workplaces to check if there's child labor. But the government of India has created a new system where the labor inspectors now do not go to inspect the workplaces. They've told the employers you have to self-inspect and fill the form yourself. Now, which employer is going to say, I have 20 children or 25 children, when he's filling the form of self-inspection? So these are some of the things we continuously are addressing and fighting, and hence child labor is hidden. And also they are working in very hazardous conditions. And children, if you see on the streets, you see children begging, but they are children as a result of accident at the workplace. We keep stopping the car and telling the child, oh, why don't you go to school? But how can the child go to school? Because the child is either maimed or accident, and it's a workplace issue which the child is challenged or has met with no arms or no legs or no limbs. So child labor is very much part of the migrant issue. Child labor is very much part of the issue, especially in South Asia.
Colonel Gracious has a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Christine, for the nice report. I had two questions. This is something which is very close to the heart of Pope Francis, we know. When he reorganized the dicastery, he kept this department directly under himself, and then Monsignor Cherney was reporting to him. Mike, I've got two questions. One is to ask you, we used to hear before of many deaths when boats were capsizing, etc. And it shocked the world and shocked all of us. Of late, we have not been hearing. Is the media suppressing this? That's one thing. And the second is, what do you advise the dioceses now in Asia, bishops of Asia? How can we help in the situation? Because to migrate seems to be now a right. To migrate, that's I think the Catholic thinking. Now, what can we bishops do we don't want to prevent migration, or how can we help them? Could you advise us?
Thank you. Migration today is out of necessity. It's not out of choice. So if migration was out of choice, the conditions of work overseas would have been different. But migration is happening because of high levels of unemployment, high levels of poverty, and they don't see any future of jobs in the countries that they are in, if you talk about South Asia region, or even in the ASEAN countries. Now, what do? One of our jobs is we can join hands with organizations who are looking at pressurizing the government to create jobs, to create policies to give us jobs. And this is not what we are having. And lack of policies, lack of jobs, because it's very easy to send people out without any responsibility, but they're very happy to get the remittances. So the government is looking at its profit, its benefit, on the blood, sweat, and tears of the migrant workers who are going overseas.
Yeah. Ms. Nathan, we have 3 more persons who are asking, bishops. So are you prepared to answer them also?
Yeah,
3
sure.
more bishops?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Archbishop Joseph Perinthotam, Bishop Joshua Marignatius, and Jerry. And more hands are coming up, I don't know. There is one more. Okay, is it Bishop? Okay. Now, Archbishop Perinthotam first and then, okay.
The mic, please.
Please give mic to Archbishop.
Media team.
Coming.
You have mentioned most of the issues that the migrants are facing. I want to share another important issue, which perhaps it is not mentioned here. That is about the pastoral care of the Catholic migrants. We have, in our church, we have a good number of migrants in different parts of the world. In some places, they are getting proper care, and we have provisions for that. But a good number of our migrants are not getting proper pastoral care. For example, our church, I belong to an Oriental church, Syro Malabar Church, and our church authorities, our hierarchy, or synod, or the head of the church, Major Archbishop, is not free to provide them pastors, to guide them, to form them, their ecclesial, spiritual, liturgical formation, and so on. So this problem is not properly addressed so far. Since long, we are facing this problem. This is my issue.
You're talking about them before leaving the country, the
No,
pre-departure.
after the migrant, the situation of the migrants, after leaving the country,
Yes.
our own church, our country,
Yes.
they are in diaspora.
They are?
Diaspora situation. I would say their own country, proper country, and they are in different parts of the world. So they have gone there for employment and so on. But they do not have the ecclesial proper pastoral care. They
when
have
go
no
to another
pastors, no
country.
priests, and so on.
Okay.
Because
when
our
they-
church authorities are not free to provide them, send pastors, priests to care for them,
You mean when they go to another country?
other countries.
Okay, fine, good. You know, when these migrants are traveling out, there's something called in India or in the region pre-departure training. They are trained on their contract, on the laws that will cover them, etc., etc. The other thing I've seen on the pre-departure training, if we can include a module or a chapter on the Christian values, the Christian issues, because when I know in most of the countries you have Philippines who are migrated to many parts in the region. I myself, when I went to Bangkok 12 years ago, when I went to the church, the first group I met was the Philippines Praise and Worship group. So sometimes the sending countries, for example, if you think you can put up some pamphlets or some notices that people going to Bahrain or people going to Bangkok or people going wherever, you can contact these churches in those countries if you are facing with any kind of a crisis. And we can easily say that our international grouping of the churches is so powerful that the first place people want to go to seek support and solace overseas is the Catholic Church. So we can make a list, which are the churches in Bahrain, which are the churches in Dubai, which are the churches in Thailand or wherever they are going. And I think it's very good that if we can help them with that information, because they will lose their religion, they will lose their culture, and they will not know where to go for their mass or their worship. And a lot of churches in Thailand, I know, have these lists put up outside the churches. If you are mass in English, in Tamil, in Tagalog, it's all put. So the church really helps in the receiving countries.
Is it Bishop Jerry Matthias? Yeah, okay. Give him mic and afterwards you.
Mrs. Nathan, thank you very much. You have given us a lot of facts and figures regarding migration. I was just wondering, any figures regarding the religious migration? What I mean is, there are so many priests and nuns from all over Asia, Africa, going to Europe and America. Now you're all smiling, but many of the sisters particularly, may not be so much priests, sisters are doing very, very menial job, taking care of the sick, working in the homes for the aged, this sort of work. And any figures and facts and regarding this? And I don't think it is all done very voluntarily. They are sent, many of the sisters are simply sent, and as you said, remittances come back to the countries, but this goes to the congregations. And so is there any figures regarding this? And have you thought about this aspect at all in your commission?
We have only 2 more interventions. Please pass on the mic to the behind. Yeah, Bishop.
Thank you so much, President Christine, for your interesting and inspiring conference talk. It is very enlightening and educational. This is not a question, but just a commentary. The Catholic faith of Asia was sown and spread by the early missionaries through their sacrifices, even to the point of martyrdom and services. We are what we are now. The faith which we live is now being preached and practiced by our migrants in those receiving countries. We can say now that our migrants are our missionaries, especially in Europe, and even we can recognize them as martyrs, and in our country we call them modern-day heroes. Migration is a reality and trend in Asia. Our migrants are builders of the infrastructures in Middle East, and they filled up all the churches, especially in Europe. Yes, much attention has for their protection, promotions of their rights, and preservations of their national costumes should be given much priority and action. And your talk calls for this action. Thank you so much.
Last intervention, Bishop Joshua Marignatius. Last.
See, we have internal migration and external migration. Internal migration from one country, from one state to another state. For example, from northeast, north to south, people are coming. Unless you know the language, you know them personally, you cannot help them. So the coming state, there must be some arrangement for receiving people where they are going to work. So that is one thing. Now, the youngsters are migrating to different parts of the world for studies and employment. That is also a threat for the original church, where they are not trained or formed, accompanied by people in the other parts of the world. Internationally, there are rules and regulations. But for the Asian countries, when we are gathered here, if we can make some arrangement, at least for the Catholics, it will be a great help for them. Some advice when they are migrating, or when they are received, some response with the original place from where they are coming. If it can be done, very good.
Thank you. Ms. Nathan, you can explain. Give your final
But what's
response.
your question?
I'm just telling, we have to consider the internal migration and external migration.
One.
Yeah.
Right. For internal migration, which we have called interstate migration from one state to another, they are all Indian nationals. They have to be treated as nationals. Say Northeast from Assam is coming to Kerala, they have to be treated on par with the Kerala workers. Now, when we have formed this Interstate Migration Act, we have made them look like they are foreigners traveling in the country. So one of the things of the Interstate Migrant Act is the workers from one state to another need to avail the same rights, the same principles, the same laws, which should be applicable to the migrant workers. Now, the migrant workers, even internationally, they are builders of the economies of the country of destination, and they are builders of economies of the countries which is sending them. So they are helping both the economies, but still, you and I know how they are treated. For overseas, the countries which they are migrating is mainly Middle East. It's very monarchy, and they will not talk about rights, laws, and regulations, because they feel, and even if you ask, you will say, in my country, we have ratified this convention. They say, go back to your country. But the workers from the poor countries going to these rich economy countries cannot think of talking about their rights. That is why the Nepali organization fixed up a full-time person in the labor attaché in these countries in the Middle East, where our workers will get help. The workers never get help from the labor attachés. The one who gets help is only the business community. So that is why trade unions from receiving countries to the sending countries are keeping labor attachés in those respective countries.
Thank you, Ms. Nathan. Thank you very much. I think it was a very good interaction between Ms. Nathan and the bishops. Now, Colonel Oswald Gracious would like to give you a memento. Good. The pastor and the sheep. Okay, now we have 3 more speakers, but they will be online. We will not have any interaction because of lack of time. Please listen to them one by one with patience and courage. First, it is Sister Abby Avelino. She is a member of the Maryknoll Sisters of St. Dominic and regional coordinator of Talitha Kum Asia, an international network against human trafficking composed of religious women congregations. So Sister Avelino will speak about 15 to 20 minutes. Sister Avelino, thank you to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us an opportunity to present to you our work. Today's topic is migration, labor, and human trafficking, the plight of Asia. I am presenting the Talitha Kum Talitha Kum is an international network against trafficking. Talitha Kum is international network of consecrated life against trafficking in persons. Talitha Kum is part of the UISG and coordinates the anti-trafficking efforts of religious sisters, facilitating networking, communication, and formation according to the strategic planning of the International Union Superiors General and the social teaching of the Catholic Church. Our vision, Talitha Kum is the expression of the Gospel of Mark. Little girl, I say to you, rise up. This expression defines the network's identity and mission by referring to the transformative power of hope, compassion, and mercy. The members of Talitha Kum, living in the bearing witness to Christian values, dialogue with and show respect for the members of the different religious tradition and for non-believers. Talitha Kum is an umbrella network of sister-led networks with more than 6,000 members on 5 continents in 92 countries. The members of Talitha Kum is inter-congregational sister-led networks committed against trafficking in person, organized primarily at the national level, involving religious men and all people of goodwill who share the vision of religious people regarding anti-trafficking. It is grassroots level oriented in dialogue with the National Conference or Association of Major Superiors. Our mission, Talitha Kum mission, is to end human trafficking and exploitation through collaborative initiative focused on main areas of actions at the grassroots level, which are prevention, care for victims, access to justice, networking, and advocacy, promoting action that affects the systemic causes. Our realities. In our realities at grassroots levels, we observe an increase of cases of human trafficking and situation of vulnerabilities exploited by traffickers all over the world. And yet, with a decrease in governmental resources for assisting victims and survivors. In our 2021 annual report, Talitha Kum networks noted a sharp increase in injustices suffered by migrants people who are even more vulnerable to trafficking to different forms of exploitation, including in the sex industry, in the workplace, in forced marriages, and in having to beg for money. What do? We are strong in prevention, ensuring hope by raising awareness. This is some works of sisters from the Talitha Kum in the Philippines. Talitha Kum chooses to stand by those who are deep in darkness of social vulnerability, oppression, and exploitation, providing spiritual sustenance of a new, dignified life. We're empowering women and girls as well as their families and communities. We call for a guaranteed equal labor rights for women. This is a scene from the Talitha Kum Bangladesh Awareness on Child and Forced Marriage. We care for victims. Talitha Kum Thailand, very strong in protection and for program for survivors, especially for children and women. Our call to action to promote effective and legal migration pathways, Talitha Kum calls in a particular global governance stakeholders formation. In doing so, Talitha Kum supports Pope Francis' invitation to welcome, protect, promote, and integrated migrants, refugees, and internally displaced people in order to prevent them in falling into the hands of human traffickers. Talitha Kum advocates for the rights and dignities of migrants and refugees and undocumented migrants. Talitha Kum provides counseling and legal consultation for labor exploitation cases of migrant workers. One of the cases that we heard mostly from the refugees that we encountered every day, this is a sample. My life was threatened in my own country. I trusted the recruited and fled to Japan. But I was deceived. Now I feel miserable, no jobs. I cannot support my family and family. This is a story of this refugee from Cameroon. The stories that we heard the sisters every day in this field. Talitha Kum is strong in networking and collaboration with NGOs, NPOs, government agencies, Catholic organizations, and other faith-based groups. Talitha Kum in the Philippines has strong networking with different organizations. Last year, we launched the Talitha Kum Call to Action. This is endorsed by the UISG. Call to Action is aimed at global governance stakeholders, including states, international organizations, non-state actors such as civil society groups, private sectors organizations, and academic institutions, and all those who have a role to play in the tireless effort to eradicate human trafficking and exploitation. Call to Action hope to bring the grassroots voices to the global stage. I'd like to show our video when we launched this I hope you hear it.
Talitha Kum is a network of
Have you finished your talk?
90 Talitha Kum is a network of Catholic sisters working in 90 countries to end human trafficking. An estimated 50,000 people are victims of trafficking each year, mostly women and children. In 2020, the Talitha Kum network reached over 185,000 people, but more is needed. To end trafficking once and for all, Talitha Kum has launched a new call to action. To governments, to civil society, and to you. We want access to justice for victims and survivors. We want to empower women and girls. We want to create safe and legal migration pathways. We want to build an economy of care and solidarity. Join Talitha Kum. Let's work together to end human trafficking and exploitation.
So to go back, the Talitha Kum Call to Action in the area of advocacy. This documents we promote an economy without exploitation, empowering women and girls as well as their families and communities. We advocate in supporting safe and legal migration pathways, including the cases of forced displacement. We call on governments to implement migration policy and borders controls that prevent human trafficking and protect safety, dignity, and human rights and fundamental freedoms of all migrants regardless of their migratory status. The call to action objectives is to care, to heal, to empower, and to restore. To care for victims of human trafficking and exploitation, and for people at risk. Throughout the world, the sister networks of Talitha Kum stand as a sign of hope. Liberation for people at risk of rape in or recovering from human trafficking. For Talitha Kum is a person and community-centered approach. We create a good relationship, build a safe and trusting relationship to heal physically, social, and spiritual wounds. We're rescuing women, technical interns, victims of exploitation by providing shelter for protection. This is what we witness in Japan. To empower the victims and survivors, as well as individuals at risk, by amplifying their voices. In Thailand and Cambodia, they have a program, and sustainability programs, and sufficiency economy, and some activities and workshops for the children, victims of and survivors of trafficking. Talitha Kum, Pakistan, sisters visited slums area to work to rehabilitate them back into the normal life. Talitha Kum call to action calls to restore human dignity by promoting access to justice. Last year, to 2021, Talitha Kum Asia reached a total number of 35,824 in the prevention, networking, training, capacity building, access to justice, care for victims and survivors. We have 61 Catholic organizations, 56 NGOs, 42 government and intergovernmental agencies. Talitha Kum Asia, members of 205 religious congregations, and active members of 3,521. We are in 20 countries in 18 established national networks. As you see, the representation of growing networks in Talitha Kum Asia, including the Middle East, in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. What are the initiatives of Talitha Kum Asia? Talitha Kum Youth Ambassadors Against Trafficking, we launched it last year. We are in the second year this time. We are in the process of the training for the almost 30 young people in Asia. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we started the monthly webinar. So we are in the 20 session or webinar this month. We have a 4th regional conference that happened not too long ago. We were in Thailand in last August. We do have online formation as we continue to deepen our understanding about human trafficking and our sharing of best practices. We are strong in networking among sending and receiving countries. So we are from our own networking, we share our best practices, especially the programs that being done by the Talitha Kum Thailand, as well as the Indonesia. So when it comes to the first interfaith collaboration and networking. So these are young ambassadors last year, the Talitha Kum Youth Ambassadors Against Trafficking, and they're growing in numbers. They're doing a good job in awareness campaign through online or through on-site. So social media platform is strong with this campaign. So we try to involve young people as protagonists in the prevention campaigns. I'd like to quote Pope Francis: "Human trafficking is an open wound on the body and contemporary society, a scourge upon the body of Christ." We know that only by working in collaboration and solidarity, weaving a web in love, we will be able to confront the structural issue that cause and perpetuate human trafficking. As members of Global Catholic Church, we affirm the pastoral orientation on human trafficking that will be incorporated into its direction into the work. We invite everyone to join us in prayer for successful implementation of this important work to end human trafficking. Together, we will create a future filled with prophetic hope by working together, forming a network of compassion and grace. Again, the expression Talitha Kum is an invitation to all call out the system that sustains human trafficking through our voice, our actions, and our daily choices. We commit ourselves to denouncing the arrogance and violence of economic and financial power when it acts against the dignity of person.
Sister, thank you very much. I request you to, if you don't mind, hold on for a few minutes before the interaction, because Cardinal Nichols is speaking to us for 7 minutes, and then we can globally ask questions, interact with you. Please, just hold on, Sister Abby. Thank you.
No problem.
Media team, you can put Cardinal Nichols.
I have this opportunity simply because I'm the president of the Santa Marta Group. This is a group established by Pope Francis to galvanize, to act as a catalyst for the Church's work against human trafficking and modern-day slavery. And I really must salute His Eminence Cardinal Bo for the leadership that he gives in these matters, both when I was able to come and be with him in Myanmar a few years ago, and on every occasion when we've had Santa Marta Zoom meetings across the world and in different places in the world. He is a great champion of this work, and I do want to thank him. And I know he will want to explain and lead the time that you have joined this conference for this matter of our work against modern-day slavery and human trafficking. Very simply, this is a battle that is being lost. The dramatic movement of people across the world, a terrible drama of migration from, especially when motivated by fear, by terror, by persecution, and of course by conflict. This drama is playing into the hands of the traffickers. And it's almost as if we see an endless supply of potential victims for human traffickers. And our efforts, and the efforts of many people, I'm afraid, are not making great progress. I say many people because there are many who stand up against the evil of human trafficking, which Pope Francis calls a wound in the body of humanity, and therefore a wound in the body of Christ. There are many different dimensions to the fight against human trafficking, from trying, for example, to chase the profits and, as it were, bring out of those profits not only punishment for the perpetrators, but help for the victims. Also to look at the root causes, which are the poverty and the fragility of people's lives in desperate parts of the world. looking at the criminal routes that are used. All sorts of different efforts are made. But the Santa Marta group has a quite specific objective, and that is to bring the resources of the Catholic Church to this battle, and in particular in cooperation with the forces of law enforcement. This isn't an obvious partnership. In some parts of the world it will be very difficult, in others it is very fruitful. But that is an important part of the work of Santa Marta, not simply to raise awareness in the church communities of this evil, which is often on our doorstep without us realizing. Not just to raise awareness, not just to educate, but also to find ways of partnership with those who see this as a crime and as a terrible crime and are dedicated to intervening in that criminal activity and rescuing people. So that might be a focus for your discussions during this anniversary gathering. The other, of course, is what can we do for the victims of human trafficking? How can they be helped? How can they be supported? How can they be moved from being victims to witnesses against this crime in a court of law? These are great challenges, but the resources of the Catholic Church, often in the religious women, those that we have a presence which is closer to vulnerable people than most other organizations in the world. Cardinal Bo always takes time to emphasize one of the most dreadful parts of the human trafficking drama, and that is the trafficking in human organs and body parts. He calls this a modern cannibalism. And I know that that helps to focus very sharply the indignation that we can feel at the exploitation of people who are seen not as brothers and sisters, not as subjects of the innate dignity that God gives us, but as commodities, to be trafficked and actually to be manipulated, to have organs removed in order to meet a market demand. So I wish you well in this anniversary gathering. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your episcopal leadership, and I hope that you will have time to dedicate to this topic of human trafficking, and I assure you that the Santa Marta group, with a growing global reach, is here to help you if that is what you would wish. May God bless you, may God bless your efforts. Be sure of my prayers, and please keep me and the work of the Santa Marta group in your prayers too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister, for holding on for us, Justin. And now over to our moderator for interaction.
Since Cardinal Nichols has given a few minutes for us, we shall interact with Sister Avelino on the question, especially Talitha Kum. It is a beautiful ministry or mission which you are conducting, and over 90 countries you have reached, and it is a wonderful work. Maybe to some of us, it may be the first time that we hear this Talitha Kum, although it is in the Bible, but your activity as Talitha Kum is a good mission. So one or two questions, are you able to answer, listening to them? Okay, no? Okay, sister.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
You can hear us.
So one or two questions about Talitha Kum and the mission of mission against what we call child trafficking, or girls especially. Yeah. Yes. Archbishop Thomas.
Sister, I come from Calcutta, and we have many religious congregations of women working in this direction, anti-trafficking efforts. And I want to thank you for giving us this knowledge and information about so much work that's being done in this very, very important, urgent area. I just wanted to know, we heard about many countries, Talitha Kum, and then a country's name attached, but didn't hear anything about Talitha Kum India. Is it just because it's just by error it is omitted, or we don't have anything like that? I just wanted to know.
Oh, thank you so much, Bishop, for your question. I really would like to inform you we have Amrat Talitha Kum India existing in our network. So they have been active members since 2009, and we have India is a big region, but we are existing in India. So thank you, and also like to take this opportunity to introduce our network, because we are a network, we are grassroots at grassroots level. So we would like you to encourage to collaborate with our sisters, especially working at the grassroots. But we are very low key, but we are underground. Thank you so much, Bishop.
Yeah. Archbishop Ambo.
Hello. Yes, Sister Abby. Your kind of work can be very dangerous too, because you are dealing with criminal networks that are engaged in human trafficking. Have you ever encountered sort of life-threatening encounters with these criminal networks? That first question. The second question is, does Talitha Kum include the aspect of cyber trafficking, especially of children, sexual cyber trafficking? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bishop Ambo. Our sisters will always put their lives at risk, but I would say there are more risk people than more than others. More risk people more than our lives. Without sexual exploitation online of children, I think this is very, very strong in the Philippines. The sisters in the Philippines and Thailand and other parts of area, especially in Malaysia as well, and Korea, they're doing their best of prevention campaigns when it comes to the online sex exploitation of children. So our young ambassador, we are also training them in order for them to help for this campaign, because most of the victims are young people. These young people, they know their language, they know their peers, and the platform that they're using are social media. So we are trying our best to do in this campaign. Thank you so much for this question.
Archbishop Bijoy.
I am Bishop of Hà Tĩnh in Vietnam. I have one question. Please kindly give us some fact or story, in fact, you have done recently. But for more information, we can be consciousness, know better about the trafficking, human trafficking.
Thank you, Bishop. We are very happy to collaborate with you. We are trying our best to really reach out our sisters in Vietnam to collaborate with in our diocese. In my experience, this is my experience in Japan. I was in Japan before coming to Rome. Many victims of trafficking in Japan are Vietnamese through the technical interns program. This is a high rising number, increasing numbers of victims of trafficking are Vietnamese. Sometimes they're really trapped. They didn't know what to do. So through collaboration or pastoral team of Vietnamese priests and sisters and other organizations and Talitha Kum with the Commission of Migrants and Refugees in Japan, we're able to help them in any other ways especially even the Japanese translation, because many of them are really trapped into this situation. I would say every month, the cases that we hear in Japan, 40 cases to 50 cases through online. Sisters, priests are working very hard to channel this information, especially the labor exploitation is happening. We have sisters with you right now. Sister Pilo Hirota could testify that this work that we're doing. Sister Paula is with you right now. She can testify all this grassroots that we are helping the victims, especially women and children. So this is all can I say from my experience. It's also coming from the Philippines. I encountered sexual exploitation. Many women from the Philippines are being victims of sexual exploitation. They were trapped. They were promised to do a job, decent job, but they ended up in different kind of exploitation, abusive, domestic abuse, labor exploitation, all kind of violence that they encounter. Thank you so
I am
much.
Archbishop Bijoy Andy Cruz from Bangladesh, Dhaka. It is a Muslim country. Many at one time or regularly, good number of women go to Saudi Arabia. And last year, many came back. They were persecuted, raped, and denied food, did not get the salary as they were promised, and finally they could come back with great difficulty. But I did not see that anybody, after coming, stood by their side. Even some of the human rights workers said something, because it's we are Muslim country, and also Saudi Arabia is the biggest Muslim, I mean, in a sense that our leader and guide, Makkah, Medina. So therefore, I did not see that whether you also do some protest or take their side and help them. Of course, Caritas helped one of the groups, one of the group of ladies. So that is my, question like that.
Thank you, Bishop. Actually, some countries in Asia are very strong in collaboration with other interfaith-based groups. And Bangladesh, they're trying our best. Bangladesh just began this network 2020 when they started this network with the initiative of Padre Litan Gomez. He is the Director of Justice and Peace, and he approached us, and we're able to give an endorsement by the bishop in Bangladesh, Bishop Conference. So this is still new. The sisters are targeting mostly these children, because the forced and child marriage are very strong in Bangladesh, as you probably know. But the migrants also, sisters are going from villages to villages, mountainous areas. It's a really, how would I say, it's hard to put a repatriation or intervention program for these migrants, as probably more increasing at this time of the pandemic. We try our best somehow to integrate also the Muslim brothers and sisters. In the Philippines, very strong collaboration with other faith-based groups, especially in southern part of the Philippines, especially in Mindanao area. Many are victims of trafficking to Gulf areas. So we are trying our best. If we reach somehow these women or children or victims of trafficking, we try to channel to a proper organization or agencies at our local networks.
Yes, Bishop. He's coming, he's coming.
Thank you, Sister Abby. I'm Daisuke from Japan. I know you very well. We met in Rome once, yes. Thank you for your nice presentation. I really appreciate the work of Talitha Kum as well as the women's religious congregations around the world to tackle with this issue, particularly for prevention and to help the victims and for the restoration of their life after coming back to their original country. My question or request is that often the victims of human trafficking is women and girls, and as bishop, as priests, it's very, very difficult to understand fully the issue of human trafficking from the eyes of women. I would say it's quite impossible. So that I believe it is to work as a church to help the victims of the human trafficking or for prevention. It's quite important to train bishops and priests. As Talitha Kum, do you have such program for bishops and priests?
Thank you so much, Bishop Nerui. We try our best to collaborate with our brothers, the brothers and also the priests to join us with this training, formation, international here in Rome. We're doing our leadership program every year. We are already in the fourth year. So it's open for religious priests, brothers, or laity even, but predominantly our sisters. Every year we have a leadership training program that run 1 year, so for 35 at least maximum. But we're open and we are really trying our best to reach out to our priests and brothers to join in our network. So this is not only in Asia, but also international. So thank you.
Thank you, Sister Abby Avelino. You have answered satisfactorily all the questions that we raised. I think we will be in touch with you, with your movement, and with your mission in the future also. Anyway, our best wishes and prayers for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bishop. This is our request really to collaboration with networking with our brothers and.
Thank you. And now we will have 2 minutes of silent prayer. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit,